Costume designers are rarely recognized for their genius, but they really should be, and today's genius is Sandy Powell and her work on the movie Hugo. Hugo is an adventure drama set in 1930s Paris train station. It follows a young orphan named Hugo who lives in the station walls maintaining the clocks and trying to repair a mysterious automaton left by his late father. As he uncovers the automaton's secrets, Hugo becomes entangled in forgotten past of filmmaker Georges Méliès, ultimately helping to restore Méliès's legacy. It is based on the illustrated novel The Invention of Hugo by Martin Scorsese. Powell used the book as reference, saying in an interview that it served as inspiration for the feeling and tone of the whole look. Other sources of inspiration include street photography by Brassai, Duano, and Cartes. Also, movies such as Under the Rooftops of Paris and La Bête. For the flashbacks of the Méliès films in particular, Powell looked at the originals and tried to recreate what she could, but she shared that it was difficult to see exactly how things were made or how they were lacking detail. Some wardrobe staff even created costumes for themselves and appeared as extras in some of the scenes. As for Hugo, Powell began to develop his look by pulling vintage items and pieces from the rental companies, stating, "I just kept putting ideas on him to see what worked, style-wise, proportion-wise, and then built from scratch." Hugo wears the same jacket and trousers throughout the film, showing that he doesn't really have a caregiver to buy him new clothes since his dad died when he was very young. You can tell that his clothes fit him small, and Powell explained that multiple versions of the same ensemble were developed to show how Hugo aged and outgrew and scruffed up his clothing. Now, when I first saw this film as a kid, what I was most fascinated with was actually his sweater. It turns out that the striped sweater was based on a real one that she found, and that she actually uses stripes very intentionally in this film for multiple characters. And it's used in order to help the audience see them in the crowded train station scenes. The stripes also appear on Isabel, and although she shares a very similar color palette to Hugo, her clothes are fresh and new, showing that she has a family that cares for her and makes sure that her clothes are washed. Stripes also find their way into Monsieur Frig's scarf and also Madame Emily's wardrobe, and also into the bookshop keeper played by Christopher Lee. Now, this was very interesting because I found out that Christopher Lee is actually one of the only actors that lived and went to Paris and traveled to Paris in the 1930s, and I'm so curious on whether or not he consulted with Powell and shared what people were wearing in his memory of how things were, because he did mention in an interview that he remembered the shops, cafes, and the restaurants that were around in that area as well. Now, the station inspector's costume was completely from scratch, made with military styling, so you see epaulets, you see brass, and structured silhouettes. This reflects his backstory as being a soldier, but it also gave him a very imposing presence. However, you can see that the color that he wears is a very vibrant blue. The color wasn't historically accurate, brightened from the original navy of the uniforms to now like a blue teal. It meant that he could be easily spotted in a crowd, especially from Hugo's high vantage point, and it worked to serve the overall aesthetic of the film, which Martin Scorsese described as a balance of realism and myth. In this movie, there are hundreds of extras, and in order to dress them all, a big team was required and over 1,000 costumes were required, and they were sourced from rental houses across Europe and flea markets in London and Paris. However, the crowd wasn't simply dressed in the latest fashions. The film is set in 1931, but like today where people wear clothes that they've had for years and years, the crowd in Hugo would still be wearing their winter coats and hats from the 1920s. And Powell stated that they tried to put more of the modern wardrobe on the younger and wealthier people in the crowd because they're usually the first ones to adopt the newer styles, or that could in those days. And in the spirit of embracing the new, this film was shot in 3D, which was a new film technique for its time. I remember Avatar was the other movie that was really big using 3D. So I wondered if this affected the costuming at all. I wonder if they talked or had to make decisions, or if that wasn't even something that was considered for costuming. Overall, this film has enchanted me since I was a little kid. I remember the Méliès scenes and then going in and researching all about Georges Méliès films and things like that, but my favorite costumes are both the flashback scenes and also the last scene where they're all at this dinner party celebrating the award, where you really get a peek at kind of the mix of 1920s, 1930s fashions that people are wearing. That Brian Selznick does appear in the final party scene, and a little thing that you might have missed is that there's actually a James Joyce and Salvador Dali in a cafe scene earlier in the movie, which I just thought was a fun note. If you like the breakdown of this film, amazing, let me know. And also if you want to see a different movie analysis or breakdown, let me know in the comments. I'm making a running list.